point of view being brought to you by the mainstream media, by the Democrats, and of course by BLM, and the point of view shown by the facts in these police-involved shootings prove the same event can look very different when filtered through different lenses. Let's begin with Dante Wright. The media and BLM want you to see a young father of a 2-year-old, a good young man, as his mother says. You've probably seen a lot of that picture. They want you to believe that his death was a result of the over-policing of black men. That is the phrase that's being used now. Dante Wright may have been a great guy deep down. Sadly, we'll never know. But what most of the coverage is hiding is the illegal handgun that you just saw in that last picture that police say Wright had an arrest warrant for. He liked to show it off on social media. They don't show you these pictures of Wright flashing gang signs and showing off big piles of cash. One of the family's attorneys, Thomas Bowers, said today that police escalated things during Wright's arrest.
If the police officers can't make life and death decisions and they can't not escalate a situation on a minor traffic infraction to a death sentence, then maybe they shouldn't be allowed to pull people over for minor traffic infractions.
As far as escalating matters, it's clear, very clear, that Wright resisted a very justified arrest and then tried to run off and get in his car and drive away. It's also clear from the video that Officer Kim Potter was shouting taser, but then fired her handgun. That also is not good. She's been charged with second-degree manslaughter. The attorney for the Wright family also did not acknowledge the warrant out for Wright's arrest. And this wasn't just for parking tickets, but for carrying an illegal pistol and evading a police officer. Wright also had been accused of pointing a gun at a woman while trying to rob her as well. But of course, of these two narratives, the two pictures you see of Wright, Dante Wright, the narrative that's clearly winning is the liberal narrative because they have almost all the power in the media. And the impact of that narrative is already being shown. In liberal Berkeley, California, city officials voted earlier this week to remove police officers from traffic stops and use unarmed civilians instead. That is definitely not a job that I would want. Would you want that job, pulling people over without a gun? And then there's the case of Adam Toledo, a 13-year-old, 13, tragically killed by police last month in Chicago. Body camera video has been released, and it's awful. Not only does it show a teenager dying, which of course is the worst part, but it also shows you just how hard it is to be a cop. Here is the video that was circulated by the media and online.
Stop right now! Hey, show me your hand! Stop it! Stop it!
All right, so you can see, they're running down the alleyway here. The teen gets to this hole in the fence and quickly turns around and puts his hands up in a kind of a weird motion. He just turns around real fast, turns his hands up just as he's getting shot. And that's about all the media wants you to see, is that moment right there. But Chicago police have also released the full version of the same video. You can see a split second before Toledo turns around, he has something in his right hand. See it right there. According to police, that's a gun. Toledo is being very shady. He's kind of hugging the fence in this weird way. Police say he tosses it behind the fence. At this point, Toledo is still trying to get away with something. Instead of being concerned with just listening to a police officer who is armed and screaming for him to just drop the gun right there in the middle of that road, clearly where he can see it, and just do the normal thing, just drop the gun and stop and put your hands up. But he tries to go behind the fence and hide it, and at that point, the officer doesn't really know what to do. And if it's you chasing that kid and you don't know if he's going to turn around and shoot you, what would you do? All fair questions. According to the police union, that officer had 0.8 seconds to determine whether or not to shoot. Think if your life was on the line. 0.8 seconds. He fired, and that teen died right there on the ground. You can see a gun was found behind the fence. It's right there in this picture, flashlight on it. Prosecutors and police say Toledo was with a 21-year-old when they responded to multiple shots fired at a car right there in that area. Multiple shots fired right at a car. Police say shell casings matched that gun right there that you see, and the gloves dropped by the other guy, as well as Toledo's hand, tested positive for gunshot residue. Now, this is a kid. He's 13 years old, and we get that. A kid that clearly was heading down a very, very, very bad path in a big way. Right now, the media is ignoring that this 13-year-old, Adam Toledo, was known on the streets of that neighborhood as Lil Homicide. Police say Toledo was known in gang circles as Lil Homicide and Baby Diablo. 13. Doesn't change the fact that this is a horrible situation, but we hope it gives you some clarity that the media does not want you to have. The usual suspects are pushing a narrative, hoping that this country is dumb enough to actually believe that cops are the problem here, and not the crime that plagues a lot of our inner city communities. Here's Jen Psaki today.
That too often in this country, law enforcement uses unnecessary force, too often resulting in the death of Black and brown Americans. The president, again, has repeatedly said that he believes we need police reform.
They don't have a clue. This is all a power grab. That's all this is. She doesn't have a clue. But the rhetoric coming from the White House is having an impact. Chicago police had officers on bikes create a perimeter around police headquarters in advance of any protests. That 13-year-old was shot in Chicago. A Chicago alderman voiced his concerns earlier this week about potential violence after the Dante Wright shooting.
And basically, it was more of the same that we saw last year. You know, canceled days off, 12-hour shifts, and city equipment out on the streets. You know, that didn't work so well last year. We saw a lot of neighborhoods were under attack, a lot of damage throughout many of the communities.
Blue cities around the country are on edge, bracing for riots next week after the verdict in the George Floyd trial. Closing arguments on that one set for Monday. Businesses have already boarded up in Minneapolis in advance of the verdict, and of course the situation in nearby Brooklyn Center as well, only about 10-15 minutes away. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz saying today on the radio there's a place for peaceful and vocal and emotional expression of your First Amendment rights, but we can't allow and we won't allow what happened in May to happen again. This was Philadelphia's police commissioner earlier today.
There is still a small percentage of people out there who choose to use these opportunities for personal gain. Let me be very clear. Unlawful behavior will not be tolerated.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.